Okay. Now I'm gonna start. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Yeah, so this is the Hack and See workshop for websites. All you need to know about websites and then deployment. So I'm gonna do this largely based off of what y'all need because this is a hackathon, so I don't want to be wasting your time. So if you guys have questions or something that you really like want to hear about, just let me know. Okay. But hi, my name is Destiny Okonkwo. I'm the education team lead for Computer Science plus Social Good, which is an organization on campus that does work for social good using technology. And so I'm on the education part of that where I'm teaching students before they go on to actually create projects for people in the community. And then these are just fun facts about me. Yeah. Okay, so this is a general agenda for what I had. We can deviate from this a little bit, depending on what you guys want to see. Like, if you guys want to talk more about like CSS and HTML, JavaScript or React, we can go down either any of those paths. And that's just like dependent on what you guys want to hear about. But I'm just gonna start with a quick intro on websites before we go into that. So actually, how many of you guys have created a website before? Okay, cool. So just briefly for those that haven't, websites are made up of three components. We have HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. HTML is what you actually see when you render your website. It's like the text, maybe like hello world that pops up as a header on your website. CSS is how your website looks. It's all about styling the different things that are on your website. And then JavaScript is just how users can interact with your website, animations, functionality, stuff like that. JavaScript is kind of special in that it lets you manipulate a lot of stuff that's on your website and kind of gives you that flexibility and kind of like, I guess, elevates how your website functions. So building your website, usually because we are in a hackathon, I would suggest React or Next.js. There are frameworks that make it a lot easier for you to build out a fully functional website, especially React is what I've had most experience with, especially with hackathons. But both of them use JavaScript, CSS, and HTML in conjunction to then create a project, a fully functional website. And so you'll need to download and install Node.js, and I'll try and share these slides with y'all for like future reference throughout the hackathon. But you would go to this website and you would be able to download Node.js, which basically allows you to use JavaScript with your website. And then this is the point at which I was like going to ask y'all if you wanted to go down any of these routes, because I can talk about anything, honestly. Did anybody have, yes? Yes, okay. So I can also share the presentations that I have for these. These are what I teach in class for CSSG. So I can do like a quick overview of React. Just stop me if you have questions. But yeah. So I'm gonna skip the Kahoot. Okay, so what is React? Like I said before, React is a framework. It makes it easier to create functional websites. And this is mainly by using components. Components are kind of the foundation of what makes React so useful. Components are basically just JavaScript functions at the end of the day. And if anything, you take away anything from this like little presentation, I just want you to remember that components are JavaScript functions that return HTML. So they're basically returning whatever you want to render on your website. And React uses JSX files, which is also kind of unique. In just simple websites, you'd be using JS. But here we're using JSX files, which then contain those JavaScript functions that return and display HTML. And so here's like a definition of components. There is code that can be reused throughout your website, but altered slightly in order to display different information that's passed to that code. So like, for example, if you had an Instagram page, for example, and you want each post to display different information, but it's in the same format, that would be something that you might want to use components for, because you want to pass that information, but you want it to be formatted the same way across the different posts on your page. And I'll show examples of what that looks like, as well as how that kind of all comes together, like in code. But so all of your pages in your React app are then passed to a singular file called app.jsx. And then this is then passed to an HTML file that will render all of your HTML on screen. Because like I said before, your JavaScript function, that is what like makes up React, is just returning HTML at the end of it. So that's basically what your React app is doing, like in the grand scheme of things. And I'm going to skip a little bit to code because I think it might be more useful to kind of see what that looks like. But so, for example, this is the app.jsx file. This is what you would have actually rendering the information on your screen. So I don't know how many of you have seen HTML before, but HTML basically has these things called tags. Tags just define how stuff inside of your tag is displayed. And so here we're saying we want a header 1. There are 6 types of headers, but right here we're using header 1, which is the largest. And then we're saying hello world inside. So this would render as a big header at the top of your screen. And it would just be like hello world. And so, like I said, React works with JavaScript functions that return HTML. So inside of here, we have function, which is JavaScript. All of this up here is JavaScript. And then we have a function named app that doesn't take in any arguments, but that returns some HTML block. So this is kind of how your React is going to be formatted. At the end of your file, you're going to export the default function, which will then allow you to use the HTML that you're returning on different parts of your website. And I'll give another example. This is just also showing how like React works with other functions in JavaScript as well. So if you wanted to write like an if statement, for example, you could do that above the return statement. So like I said, this kind of functions exactly like a JavaScript function would. And it's very similar to even how Python is written. So all of that would go inside the function, but before your return statement. Does anybody have any specific questions so far?
What is the receiving HTML file?
Yes. Yeah. Okay, let me see if I have an example. Okay, here we go. So, like I said, you're going to be passing most of your components to app.jsx because that's one that ultimately is going to like render your HTML. So in app.jsx, you have something called my component, and this right here is defined in another file called mycomponents.jsx. So this is just another function. So this function on my component returns some HTML block that has a paragraph called my component. And so when we return this and export it into this file, which is the main file, all of this code will just automatically put into our object destination. And that's very useful, especially when you want to kind of compartmentalize your different things on your website. Like I was saying, if you have multiple, if you like want to send multiple times, you can just say my component, and it'll show this one. For you. That makes sense. Any other questions so far? And here is kind of what makes React so useful. Like we were just talking about, you can actually have components with JavaScript functions pass to other JavaScript functions. And so what's cool about it is I can actually pass information into those components. So you can pass, say, your name into a component, and it can use that information that you're passing to it to then like render different things to the screen. So, for example, if you wanted to pass a name, you would say name equals destiny, where name is just any like variable name that you choose. And then you would get that using props, which is just information. You can call this anything you want, honestly, but usually it's called props. And it's a dictionary that actually contains the different like variables that you're passing. So for example, it would be like props, it would be name, destiny. So to access that and get that into your component that you're passing it into, you would actually use props.name, which is how you access things inside of dictionary. And so if you want to use that within your HTML, it's very important that you use these brackets right here, because these brackets signify that you're trying to use JavaScript inside of your HTML. And that's very useful for other things as well. Like say you want to, I don't know, run a function that you wrote like out here inside of your HTML, you can do that as well, and it'll run it for you. Yeah, does that make sense? So yeah, props is just a dictionary that kind of envelops all the different things that you have passed into that component. And you can pass more than one variable, like you can put name, you can put age. And I don't think you need to separate them by commas. You would just do like name, age, whatever else you want to put. Okay, and these are just a few reasons to use React, but for the most part, it's because of those components. They just make it very helpful to do different things without having to write the same code over and over. It also makes website building in general faster because you don't exactly have to, like I said, write those things over and over and change out information like you would with a regular, just like pure HTML and CSS. And it's used in industry, so that's something that's kind of important. Instagram Web is made from React, Facebook Web, Khan Academy, various different things. So in this hackathon, it might be useful to kind of get that experience, and then also just like easy to use and make it like faster to make in the long run. Does that make sense, everybody? Okay. Do y'all want to go through and make your first app? Because I can like help y'all along with that, or we could talk more about HTML and CSS, or go into deployment. Does anybody have a preference? Can we go over JavaScript? Okay. Yes. Yes, I can send them out. I'm not in the Discord, but I can send them to, are you on the Discord?
Yeah.
Okay, could you send this slideshow and then the links to all of the slides for like CSS, HTML, They're all like linked on these blocks. So we're gonna go through JavaScript very quickly. So JavaScript is inherently very similar to Python and other coding languages, just in the fact that like how you define variables and how you do functions, especially and if statements and while statements, all of those type of things are very similar to what you see in other languages as well. So how many of you guys have seen variables before? Okay. So just briefly, variables in JavaScript are used to store data values or information that can be strings, dictionaries like we talked about before, integers, like floats, which are just decimal numbers. And in JavaScript, you can declare variables using 3 keywords, which are let and var. They are all pretty similar, but they just do slightly different things. Let just create a variable that you can change, while const is one that you cannot change. It's like a constant variable. Var is not as like recommended to use, but it does the same thing as let basically. It's just slightly different in scope, but like in scope of how you can use vectors. But usually you're going to be using let and const. And so these are some examples of how you can use and define your variables. So for example, like we saw before, you can do let name equal destiny, and this is a variable that contains a string destiny. And this one is mutable, which is opposed to const here. Yes.
So when you say mutable, is it like just changing actually changing the value of it, or are there any sort of like with Java where like it's actually permanently stored in the memory, you can just change the form?
So when I say mutable, I'm talking more about changing the contents of that variable.
Okay.
So like in the data, you would be going in changing like what's at that data point.
So there's nothing like kind of similar to immutability in Java and JavaScript. I mean,
In Java, I guess there's a keyword I would directly say. Kind of thing. I don't think there's like a direct keyword that kind of like aligns. But I might be wrong. But like what I mean by mutable is just that you're not exactly changing the pointer, you're changing what's at that location in memory.
Okay.
So like, for example, after this line, because name is mutable, you could do name equal like John or something, and it would work. Opposed to here, if you did age equals like 18, after that, it would not let you, it would stop you. And var does the same thing. You can also change this afterwards to do the computer equals Lenovo. Okay. And like I said before, variables can be arrays or lists as well, which are just by the square brackets. So functions in JavaScript. How many of y'all have seen functions? Okay, so functions are basically input-output machines. You may have seen something like, I don't know, in grade school, if you had those little boxes that you put like a number in and then something comes out and you gotta figure out what the block does, kind of like that. But you're kind of defining what the contents of that block are. So how you do that, you would have some kind of function declaration, which is this line right here, that defines what's going into your function and what you're going to be using to call those functions. Like, for example, you're going to be using A and B And so you're going to use that throughout your function to then modify and change and return something. So, for example, here we're adding two integers, a and b, and we're getting a const called sumInts that is just the sum of a and b, and we're just returning that. Notice that we are using semicolons. JavaScript, they are kind of optional, but it's just best practice to use them. It won't flag you if you don't, but best practice. So then you return that integer here, and your function would exit. And you can use that function by calling the function names to the add-ins. But add-ins, you would pass in both of those variables, those values that you want to be using. So you're going to pass in 1 and 2. It's going to go up here, 1 and 2. So you're going to do 1 plus 2 equals 3, and it's going to return 3. So then in my sum, you would be saving 3. And then you can go ahead and print using console log. So you're just printing to the console. And then you're printing 3. Make sense? Yes. So that's something that's built in JavaScript. It's kind of like print in Python. It's basically the equivalent. But that just prints out to your terminal or like whatever you're using. Okay. Again, here, this is another example of how you can use console log. It's pretty lax in the fact that you can pass in like integers or strings into your console.log. Again, same thing as print. And then those are just different things that you can store in your different variables. Any questions so far? Yes.
So why do you want the sum to be constant?
Okay, so if yeah, so you can make it like variable and mutable. But if you aren't planning on changing it, what I heard from like my manager during my internship was just that it's best practice to use const. I'm not exactly sure the reason for that, but it was just like it's supposed to mean. But if you did want to change it after you exit the function or like even within the function, you would use let instead.
Can you give me an example of when you would want something that's mutated?
To move data, you said?
Yeah.
To like change it.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So for example, if you wanted to say you were in the function, right? But instead of add int, it's add int plus 1. Okay. So you want to do sum of ints, you want to get the sum of these two ints. Let's pretend that we're doing this on 2 different lines. And then right below it, you want to add a 1 to the final return. Okay. So you would do let instead, so you can change this variable, and then you would still make it into a plus b. But then on the second line, you want to add 1 in addition to what you've already done. So you want to do sum of ints equal sum of ints plus 1. In that situation, you want to change sum of ints, the variable. So you want it to be let, so that you're able to do that. Like you don't want to be constant. So in that situation, you would be using let instead of const. That makes sense. Any other questions? Okay. Do y'all want to continue with JavaScript, or I can go into deployment?
To do the React demonstration.
Yes. Okay, so we can do a quick like React app. Let me see if. So this is going to be after you've downloaded Node.js because you do need Node JS in order to actually create a React app. But it's fairly simple to go ahead and download that. So if you want to do that and follow along, that might be like a good way to get acclimated to React. Okay. So first things first, you're going to actually want to create a new folder. And this is just so that like all of your files, because there are a lot of files when you originally create a React app, it just makes it easier for you to read. And like know exactly what's in your React app. So I'm going to go ahead and actually create a new folder here. Let's go ahead and see. And so I'm just going to open that in VS Code. So in order to make a React app, you're actually going to have to open the terminal either in VS Code or in your actual computer. And you're going to go ahead and navigate to your empty folder, which I have already done in VS Code, and you're actually going to run this command. This command actually uses Vite, which just allows you to run your application, your website. And it also allows you to use a template. So let me show a breakdown of like what this line is doing. If I have that, let me see. Yeah. So here's basically what this line of code is doing. This npm create is just telling you to create the latest, using the latest version of Vite, which again is what allows you to run your website. It's telling you, okay, I want to name my React app. You can choose anything here, separated by those dashes. And then this last part just says, okay, and I want to use a template called React. There are a lot of different templates that you can use. Here I'm just using one of the defaults that is often used just to get started. So what would this look like? You would just go into your terminal down here. You get to a new terminal by going to the top, saying terminal, doing new terminal. And you would actually go ahead and just paste that command in there, press enter. And it's going to ask you like if it's okay to proceed. It might need download stuff. Sometimes you press yes. And it goes ahead and creates a whole new folder for you, which you can see right here. This has a bunch of stuff in it, but ultimately what you're going to be working in is SRC, which is source. And like I said, here's your app.jsx file. This is what is going to be what you're probably going to be editing most, as well as like the other components, the other pages that you're going to be using. If you want to have multiple pages, you're going to be using React Router DOM. Something else that you have to download, but it's pretty simple if you just look up React Router DOM. So say I want to run this app. It actually gives me a command right here that I can use to run it. So you just paste that right there after you create your app. Oops. I have to install something else here. Okay, I honestly have no idea what this is, but. Oh, you know what it is. This is a common mistake, and I do this all the time. You have to actually CD into like change directory into the app before you run. So let me just go. Okay, sorry. Mm, okay. But if y'all need the steps while that's loading, let me see. You can go ahead and like take a picture of this right now, or it'll also be in the slides. But this is essentially how you would create your app. Do not forget step 7 like I just did, because you will run into errors. Um, let me see if that one had it work.
The folder you created was source.
Like that the React created?
Yeah.
It created this whole folder right here called my React app. So this whole thing is what it gave me. Okay, let's see if it works now. Okay, cool. So now it gives you a link. And this link right here is actually going to allow you to, okay, wait, I'm in another. This link right here is actually going to allow you to open up your website and run it, which is what Vite allows you to do. So let me just show you how that kind of shows up. And this is, again, the template that we decided to use called React. So this is what your website looks like right now, what React is just giving you by default using that template. It has some functionalities in here. So you can like kind of see different things move when you hover. It even has a little counter right here. And this is just like a good example of how React works, as well as like how JavaScript and everything comes together to make it work. And yeah, so that's how React works and how to make your own website using React. I want to go quickly over deployment really quickly, because that might be useful to y'all when you're trying to make submissions for your project. So deployment is, oh wait, before that, really quickly, collaborating is really easy using VS Code. You can actually like do almost like Google Docs, but for VS Code, which is pretty cool. And it's very useful for hackathons, like especially because you are sitting side by side, but you might be working on different files. And it makes it kind of easier to like manage using GitHub if you're using VS Code Lecture. So you can download this in VS Code by just going to this icon right here, which is called extensions. You click on it, you type in live share. It's the first one that comes up, the one that with the verified check mark. And with this image, and it would say install here. And so then once you install it, you can go ahead and actually share by saying live share right there at the bottom. It's going to copy a link to your clipboard that you can then share with your team members. And I'm going to share this with Aiden really quickly, just to give you an example of how it works. Okay, let me know if you get that. Oh, should I send it via email? I sent it on text, but I can send it in email too. No problem. But any,
People following along, it should be under workshop materials, that's where the slide is.
So yeah, and down here it just says shared, which just means that you have that open for other people to share. And then once he clicks on that link on his computer, he's going to be able to like make edits to the same files on my file system, like from the person that has shared that link. Okay. And it says that you joined. So now I think, yeah, it literally just shows like his little person who's making edits, which is just really cool. Because it makes it convenient for just like working on things and testing them at the same time. Thanks, Ethan. So if you want to take a picture of this, again, it'll be in the slides. But yeah, it's very useful for hackathons especially. Okay, and now we're going to talk a little bit about deploying. So deploying again just means that you're making it public to everybody. And this is like how you see most websites. So it's going to kind of look just like that. You just type in a URL and you get access to all the information that that website has. There are many platforms that you can use to deploy websites, like GitHub Pages if you're working with GitHub. Render is what I use. And it is kind of useful if you have a server, for example. Yeah. So for this example, I'm going to use Render really quickly. But yeah, again, Render is just kind of useful in the fact that it allows you to also launch servers for free. And servers are just where you're going to store like databases and how you're actually going to interact with that database and the information that the user is giving you, like emails, name, passwords, stuff like that. So here's an example of something that I actually deployed. And it's pretty cool. It has like my own unique URL. You can all type this in and get the same information. And it has all like these little movies that you can watch, like Mark has watched, or favorite. So I'm gonna just do you guys want to walk through how that works? Okay.
This is posted for free.
Yes. Yeah.
How is it different than, have you ever used that?
I have not. Yeah.
Curious
Mm.
how they do.
Yeah. But let me go ahead and I'm actually going to like fork the GitHub for the one I just showed you so I can like show you again how that works. Guess I'm doing some research this week. Okay, and you're gonna have to make a Render account, but that's also fairly simple. You can sign up, I think, with your email, like your Gmail. And once you log in, let me see what I did. Once you log in, you can see all of the websites that you've already deployed, as well as make new ones. So yeah. So for example, if you want to create a new like website, you're going to say web service right here. And that's actually going to pull up all of the repositories if you connect your GitHub. So, let me see. I guess we can just redeploy the one that I already had. And so it's just going to like have you click on your GitHub page or your GitHub repository, and then just press connect. And you can just, I'm going to do new. Let's see. You can go through and like define most of these, but usually they get it correct the first time. You're going to do branch main, got node here, which you're using. Root directory, src. I'm pretty sure it's src. But yeah, and then down here, you're actually going to do npm run dev because that's how you actually launch your website on your local computer. So you can just click free. You don't have to use any of these. And if you have variables, you put them in here. So are y'all familiar with env variables by chance? Yes. Oh, thank you. Good catch. Okay. This actually probably won't run because I don't have my API key. But if you do have your API key, like for example, for the one that I was using here, I was using an API to get like the most recent movies, which then are passed into components here in React. But if you're using an API, you'll have to put your API key in there, and it'll kind of be the same as if you were using an env file on your local computer. And an env file is just, you should be using them in this hackathon. env files are where you contain all of your sensitive information. So like passwords, if you have API keys, which are sensitive because they allow you to access information. And if other people get a hold of it, they could potentially use it, which might like, if it's not free, it might run up your bill. And you don't really want that. So what you want to do is put all of your API keys, passwords, things like that in an env file. It's called .env. You can look that up as well, and it'll have information on how to do that, specifically with React. And you'll need to put those variables in render as well, so render can then use them when deploying your website. Okay. And that was all I had like planned out. Do you guys have any questions at all? Yes.
Hey everyone, also just a quick note for LiveShare. LiveShare is a collaboration tool where the default is that you follow the host. So that means you may at first have some restrictive access. You want to make sure that the person who is following you has access to write in your document. And also make sure that if you're following them and you're working very closely on the same file, it will jump around a lot because you're following the host. You just click Control-Alt-F and you will be able to work on the same file independently on their like local machine. Does that make sense? All right.
Yes.
I know that sometimes like when I was doing live show with like other people do like HTML, they could run like a live server.
Yeah.
With using React would be able to run the code.
No, I don't think so. I think only the person that's hosting the website can actually that might be incorrect. I'm not sure how much access you have originally to like that person's file system and terminal and stuff like that, but you might be able to if you play around with the settings. Yeah. Any other questions? Thank y'all for coming out. Of course.